Okay, thanks. Good afternoon. I formally declare open this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire Council on the 29th of June 2022. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decision to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I would like to advise that this council meeting will be recorded and live streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practical. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that it is an offence to make an unauthorised recording of the meeting. I note that there are nil apologies. Okay, now moving on to question time. Colac Otway Shire encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions of council at council meetings. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention to do so before 5 p.m. on Monday the 25th of April 2022. No requests were received. I have received questions in writing from Mr James Judd, Marina Lewis, Jan Ratcliffe, Jenny Barrett, Jeff Cook, Nasser Cobb, Jane Gross, Rosamond Longmore, Tim Cobb, Beth Sprunt, David Brown and Prabha Cutty. Questions received will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the executive management team. Responses will be provided in writing following the meeting. I'll also note I have received a large amount of questions, so there won't be time to read all questions, and responses to those all questions will be sent to the people who have asked the questions. Can I also just show, before I start going to the submitted questions, can I just have a show of hand of people in the gallery who would like to ask a question? Oh, thank you. All right, we have now questions from Mr James Judd. What was the total staff turnover by the Colac Otway Shire Council in the 6 months to end of December 2021? Plus, how does this compare with the calculations when setting the 2021-2022 council budget? Response from General Manager Corporate Services.
Through the Mayor, staff turnover in the 6 months to the end of December 2021 was a total of 34 headcount, or 26.09 full-time equivalents. There was no consideration of turnover of staff when setting the 21-22 council budget.
Okay. If it is not prudent for council to replace lids on garbage bins that state wrong things can be put in bins until at least 2026, it is not prudent for council officers to use council meetings to be critical of the community for not sorting garbage correctly, since those who are in the garbage collection zone and use the service provider must use bins that council owns. So if they follow instructions given by council, wrong items would go in the bins. No one must have to check up with the council before putting garbage in bins each time. The Colac Otway Shire Council has refused to answer many questions on what is glass that can be put in the glass-only bin, since beer bottles have not been allowed to be made of glass for many decades, since the material they are now made from has very different qualities to glass. Plus, it was a government instruction that glass no longer be used in making beer bottles. While you state some non-glass items can be included, other glass containers are not mentioned. Response from Acting General Manager Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, I note that Mr Judge hasn't asked a question as such. However, I'm happy to take this opportunity to address some of the matters that he has raised. Firstly, if officers have commented about anyone in the community putting incorrect materials into the different bins, it will have been to explain why education about contamination remains important. If there was any perception that officers were critical of the community, that would not have been our intention, and I apologise if it came across that way. With respect to the information on lids, we didn't identify that there was still reference to glass on lids in yellow bins, until after the purple lidded bins for glass were distributed. However, to now change the lids would be material. We are trying to raise awareness and educate our community about the change. If this proves to be unsuccessful, we will review options in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Now move on to questions from Marina Lewis Jallibrand. Question 1. By what amount has Council reduced its gross carbon emissions over last financial year, i.e. gross emissions meaning exclusive of offsets? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council reduced its carbon emissions by 7% in 2021 financial year and by a further 44% by purchasing 100% green power.
Question 2. How does Council plan to reduce reliance on offsets in the next year, 2022-23? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council will continue to seek funding for and implement emissions reduction projects that reduce emissions related to its gas and fuel use. Thank you, Mayor.
Now we move on to questions from Jan Radcliffe Forrest, and I'll note that both the responses will come from the Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure. When I asked at a previous council meeting on the 27th of April 2022 about whether the Shire was buying electric vehicles for its fleet, I was told they were not because of lack of charging infrastructure and short battery life. A friend who drives an EV tells me that she can travel as far as Geelong before recharging and that it is best for the vehicle battery to be plugged in at an ordinary power point outdoors, which will provide a full recharge overnight. While this would clearly not enable long journeys, it would cover most of the local travel required of the fleet, so some EVs would be useful immediately. A medium-range EV can travel approximately 220 kilometres before recharging. Note that it is a much greater range than for a hybrid EV and would allow travel between Colac and Apollo Bay without emissions. There is a shortage of public charging facilities, but there are some. In Colac, there are private Tesla chargers at Coles, a private charger at Colac Caravan Park, which costs a $10 flat rate, another private one at Winchelsea Pub. In Geelong, there are chargers installed by the council free at the Velodrome in North Geelong, Western Beach, Armstrong Creek, Grovedale, so many. Surely it is the council's responsibility to show leadership in this area and provide chargers, as has been done in Geelong, rather than complain that they are not available. I am sure that there must also be multiple charging facilities in Melbourne also, and therefore travel as far as Melbourne would also be feasible, opening up yet more immediate usefulness for EVs in the fleet. Will the council commit to buying more EVs as soon as they are available for its local travel and travel to Melbourne? Response?
Thank you, Mayor. Council's fleet currently includes 12 hybrid EVs. 7 of these hybrid EVs were added to the fleet this financial year, replacing petrol diesel vehicles as evidenced to buying EVs. The local government sector has been discussing the opportunity of statewide collaboration procurement of EVs, which could be an exciting opportunity. It may also drive the provision of more charging stations. Watch this space. Thank you, Mayor.
Will the council provide more charging infrastructure within the Shire to encourage more EV use? Response.
Thank you, Mayor. Whilst Council is not directly providing charging infrastructure within the Shire, we are assisting private entities that are in the process of installing fast EV charging infrastructure, both in Apollo Bay and Colac, in public car parks owned and managed by Council. These EV chargers have been funded through the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning's Destination Charging Across Victoria program. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, questions from Jenny Barrett, Apollo Bay. Currently, the east coast of Australia is experiencing a supply crisis in energy for homes and industry, and there is a critical need for Council to be actively advocating on related matters. How is Council advocating for changes to government planning regulations to ensure that all new homes in the Shire's new proposed housing developments, example Colac and Apollo Bay, are optimally energy efficient and gas-free? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, Council has not specifically advocated to the state government on these matters. The state government has been working with local government in recent years to introduce greater sustainability outcomes into planning schemes, and this work is ongoing. It is still too early to understand the future direction of gas in new developments. It is acknowledged that there is community interest in reducing the use of gas to further reduce carbon emissions, and we encourage the community to raise this through the current community engagement process for the Council's environment strategy.
Thank you. Question 2. What is Council planning to do to maximise householders' installation of rainwater collection tanks, solar panels and heat pumps? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council continues to promote and participate in programs that assist householders in installation of such systems. For example, Council recently participated in the Geelong Plus Solar Bulk Program that was run across 5 councils of the G21 region. 45 Colac Otway householders and businesses installed solar generation systems, solar battery storage or heat pump hot water systems. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Questions from Jeff Cook, Colac. In the annual report 2020-21 on page 18, it is stated that working closely with the project delivery and Bluewater teams, the environment team have provided significant project guidance and technical advice promoting the advantages of highly efficient electric heat pumps as an alternative to the current gas boilers. And in April 2021, Council allocated funds to undertake this energy efficiency and emissions reduction upgrade. Approval of these funds as $150,000 was made at the Council meeting on the 28th of April 21 by unanimous vote. In response to a question as to why the boilers haven't been replaced, it was stated that the gas boilers would not be replaced until they had come to the end of their life. Okay, question, how is it that a decision by Council can be changed or not acted upon without the matter coming before Council and being voted on again? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, a feasibility report was undertaken which indicated the total cost of centre electrification would be around $3.1 million. Councils were briefed and agreed that the project is not viable and so the funds are freed up for use at this time.
Thank you. Second question, are the allocated funds still available for the same purpose in the coming financial year? If not, what were those funds used for? Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through the Mayor, with response to the approval of the $150,000, $20,000 was spent on a feasibility report and the remaining $130,000 will be used to offset council loans.
Thank you. Questions from Nassau Forest. On the 10th of June, Council responded to my question on the 19th of May, stating Council takes its responsibilities concerning management of on-site wastewater very seriously, to the extent that it funded a temporary full-time domestic wastewater management officer role in 2018-19 to undertake audits of unsewered properties across the Shire over a 3-year period. This political narrative is not supported by facts. For example, in 2018, Council audits of septics in forests, the number of unknown septic systems was 34%, and the high risk was 39 out of 113 properties audited. In 2021, Domestic Wastewater Management Plan lists the number of unknown septic systems as 69 out of 149, 46%. Question, would the Council be honest and transparent and publish the progress of attending to their statutory responsibility regarding wastewater in the Shire, with numbers comparing 2015 and 2022 for the categories of unknown, high risk and EPA compliant? And there's also a second question. The Council stated Council has responded to a number of individual sites within forests since 2017 where the impacts of off-site discharge were directly impacting other properties owners. How many sites did the Council attend and how many were resolved? Numbers, please. Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, Council is unable to provide the information requested in the first of these questions and will take on notice of the request for information on the sites that have been inspected and where wastewater issues were resolved and respond to Mr. Cobb.
Thank you. Now, moving on to a question from Jane Gross, Apollo Bay. The minutes of the Colac Otway Shire planning meeting on the 9th of Feb 2022 state that a resolution was carried 4.3, requesting that the Planning Committee refuses to grant a permit for the use of the land at 135 Great Ocean Road, Apollo Bay, for the sale of packaged liquor. The third part of that resolution requested that officers prepare a business case for the 2022-23 budget process for councillors' consideration to undertake strategic work regarding the social impact of licensed premises across the Shire. My question is whether this has been considered and whether there is any allocation in the draft budget before Council today to undertake this work. A response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council considered funding this policy work in the 2022-23 budget process. However, due to limited unallocated resources, competing priorities across Council and capacity of the organisation, this project hasn't been included in the draft 2022-23 budget.
Okay, questions from Rosamond Longmore, Colac. What climate change mitigation adaptation activities are being proposed for 2022-23 to support the community in its quest to reduce carbon emissions? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council will continue its work towards better bushfire protection and community leadership, resilience and preparedness for emergencies. Incorporation and consideration of climate change predictions into land use planning, the design of public infrastructure and development assessments, and the implementation of an increased street tree planting program to increase urban canopy cover and shade. Council also supports, promotes and participates in programs in partnership with community groups, other councils and other levels of government that assist our community in reducing their carbon emissions. We'll also continue supporting a number of community groups that are delivering projects that address the impacts of climate change and improve community and environmental resilience. Council will also progress development of the new environment strategy. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Now a question from Mr Tim Cobb, Skeens Creek. Council will be aware that there is much concern about Gore Kappa having taken over the rec reserve in Apollo Bay due to Gore Kappa's primary focus on camping and lack of experience and remit in sport facility management. A few years ago, Council discussed taking over management of the rec reserve from the Otway Coast Committee. Will Council urgently discuss the possibility of taking over management of the rec reserve with Gore Kappa and share the response with councillors? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, Council hasn't had any discussions with the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority about the future management of the Apollo Bay Recreation Reserve. The reserve currently provides a range of services, including active recreation facilities for the community and camping facilities for visitors to the region. Therefore, the future management of the reserve needs to consider the joint services provided through the reserve. Council is an active partner in the preparation of the Apollo Bay Recreation Reserve Master Plan and will continue to lend its expertise on the development and management of active sports facilities.
Council Plan Theme 1.2.3, page 185 of Agenda, concerns delivery of the Colac Otway Shire managed City Deal projects. The indicators are all 3 City Deal projects delivered on time and on budget, and implement City Deal project as to agreed plans. Councillors will be aware that the Colac Otway Shire managed City Deals projects are facing cost overruns and that the coastal communities will be sorely disappointed with Colac Otway Shire if it fails to deliver these projects as planned. Is the CEO lobbying hard to find a solution which allows construction work to start as planned, at least on both the Coastal Trail and Harbour redevelopment, the 2 projects which are strongly supported by the community? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, Colac Otway Shire CEO is working closely with Regional Development Victoria and other stakeholders to address the variation between funded budget and the estimated costs of the project deliverables. A review of the 3 Colac Otway Shire City Deal projects has been conducted and the findings are being documented by Regional Development Victoria. These findings will be presented to the City Deal Program Leadership Team made up of the Mayor of Greater City of Geelong, State and Federal Ministers responsible for the City Deal projects. The Leadership Team will determine the future scope and budget of the program. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Now, questions from Beth Sprunt, Barwon Downs. Will the council make a substantial increase in the community grants program with a specific category for climate change mitigation and adaptation projects, including an additional amount of approximately $100,000 to foster a variety of suitably scaled projects in communities across the Shire? And/or will the council provide guidance and technical support to communities across state and federal grants related to climate change mitigation and adaptation? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council has allocated $311,500 in its draft 2022-23 budget for its grants program, which is consistent with the funds provided in previous years. Benchmarking indicates that Council's allocation for community grants is more than similar-sized regional councils. Council has not discussed increasing the level of funding through the grants program. The current program allows for climate change mitigation and adaptation projects to apply for up to $10,000. Council will review its grants program during the 2022-23 year, including the types of categories and funding limits. Council officers are available to provide support and guidance to community organisations when applying for external grants.
Thank you. In keeping with its commitments in the Council Plan 21-25 and the Council Draft Budget 22-23, what funded projects and practices does the Council propose to assist the community's uptake of emissions reduction and water usage reduction strategies? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, Council supports, promotes and participates in programs in partnership with community groups, other councils and other levels of government that assist householders in the uptake of such strategies and will continue to do so.
Thank you. Questions from David Brown, Apollo Bay. Can Council please explain the very large reductions in the 2022-23 Emergency Services Management budget compared with the two previous years, at a time when the catastrophic impacts of climate change and extreme weather events are increasing in magnitude and certainty? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the actual emergency management budget for the 2018-2019 financial year was $189,000 and the actual for 2021 was $999,000. However, this amount included costs associated with the pandemic response, and the 22-23 budget does not include any costs for pandemic response. Also, Council made an allocation to landslip works in the 21-22 budget, but these works are largely complete and underway. Remaining works will be carried forward into next year's for completion. The region experienced further extreme weather events in late 2021 through storms. Capital works to address these impacts will be largely funded through the Federal Disaster Recovery funding. This is not detailed in the draft 22-23 budget as claims are progressively made. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Question 2. Council has informed the community that the new tree planting has begun. This is cause for celebration. Can Council confirm that it has undertaken the promised development of the urban cooling strategy and canopy target as the necessary planning tools for effective planting outcomes? If yes, where can ratepayers view the strategy and canopy target? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, unfortunately these planning tools have not been developed as yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Mr Prabhakati Colac. My question follows on from my email to councillors seeking clarification on their decision to give our community a lesser voice at council meetings compared with that afforded to their citizens by Colac Shire, including an open forum and the opportunity for the people to speak to agenda items in which they have an interest. I thank councillors that have responded to my message and acknowledge the challenges they have highlighted. I believe our focus should be on overcoming them, recognising the benefits and achieving the goal of ensuring that we are not citizens of a lesser democracy. Would council be prepared to explore options to give the COS community a greater and more meaningful voice at council meetings, along the lines of that provided to the Corangamite community, starting with an investigation on how this is achieved in Corangamite Shire? I would be prepared to assist with this in there are resource issues involved. Given that the rules that prevent me from asking councillors a question does not prevent them through the chair from offering to answer it, I would welcome councillors' view on my question. Each council determines how it manages its own council meetings through its governance rules. I think the Colac Otway Shire demonstrates a clear commitment to listening to the community. We have one of the most open question times, I think, of probably many councils in the entire country. And we have very open question time and other proactive engagement. And I thank Mr. Cuddy for his feedback. Okay, now moving on to questions from the floor. To ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions, I may need to limit the number of questions from each person to 2. Then once everyone has had an opportunity to ask their initial question, and if time permits, I will invite further questions. Please note that whilst we will do our best, it may not be possible to answer all questions without notice tonight. If this is the case, they will be answered later. Before we proceed, I remind everyone in the gallery that you must ask a question, and you can have a short preamble to your question. I think it's 90 seconds now. So I noticed a couple of people put their hand up earlier. I'll invite Miss Francis to come to the lectern.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My 2 questions, I'd just like to direct them to the state of the foreshore in Apollo Bay. There are not many things that aren't privatised these days, and the skate park is one of them, and it's a very valuable asset to the youth of the community, having just listened to how important such things are as the planned music festival. A skate park gets worn out through heavy use, which it does get, and just by the effluxion of time it becomes slowly out of fashion or just outdated. So I just wonder what plans the council has to manage that skate park properly, seeing there are a few rumours around that it's going to be removed. There's some litter around the place, and it's not very good that people are allowed to continue to sell beer and things in glass near a beach, when you think about that. Fireworks greatly upset domestic animals and some pets, as we've heard at great length about the music festival. And the toilets indeed are terribly, terribly dirty and out of date, and some of them are closed after hours. So does the council have any plans to bring our skate park up to a decent standard?
Thank you for your question. I'll ask the General Manager of Development and Community Services to respond.
Through you, Mayor. So the foreshore is actually managed by the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority, as you may be aware. So council hasn't got any plans at this stage to be maintaining that facility, but we do work closely with the authority. As you're probably aware, we've got the draft community infrastructure plans out for public exhibition at the moment, and that mentions that whilst the skate park can remain on that site while it's got a useful life, the authority will be looking to relocate that in the future once it doesn't have a useful life. So what I would encourage you, Ms Francis, to do is to have a look at the draft plans and make a submission to those if you feel strongly about the skate park remaining.
So I understand you're not going to repair it or update it, you're going to let it fall into disrepair and put it somewhere else?
Sorry, I should clarify that. So the authority have made a commitment that they will continue to maintain the skate park, absolutely.
On that site?
Yes, yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms Francis. I'll now call on Mr Webber.
Tony Webber, Otway Forum. First question is, why wasn't both the Climate Action Plan and the Environment Plan debated together rather than one before the other when they're so linked?
Yep. I might ask the... Mr Webber, you mean why weren't they done at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you, Mr Webber. With most strategies, it's important you put the strategy in place first, and then the climate action plan will fall out of that. So certainly be done in parallel, but we'll get some feedback in relation to the environment strategy, then the climate action plan will fall out of that.
Right, thank you. The second question is about the meeting in Canberra last week, Could we have a brief report from either the Mayor, the CEO or the Deputy Mayor on how you felt it went in Canberra?
Oh, yeah, certainly. And I might ask our ALGA representative to make comment, Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I am the appointed ALGA representative for Council, and I was pleased to be joined by the CEO, the Mayor and Councillor Costin. I'll be preparing a report that I'll table at a Council meeting. I didn't have time to prepare it for this meeting, and given the large agenda, it's probably a good idea to hold it over. So we'll be preparing a report, and there was a comprehensive article in the Colac Herald the other day summarising some of the things that we saw and did.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else from the gallery have a question? No? All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Okay, now we have no petitions or joint letters, and I'll move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? I'll go to Councillor Costin first.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a conflict of interest in relation to item 10.6, part 2. It includes projects auspiced by the Apollo Bay Chamber of Commerce, and I received a disclosable gift in the form of an election campaign donation from the Apollo Bay Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm declaring a conflict of interest in relation to item 10.1, the LRCI projects funding. This item discusses funding for the Memorial Square toilets, the Colac RSL sub-branch made a submission against those toilets, and I'm a member of an RSL subcommittee and actively involved in the activities of the RSL, and therefore have a conflict.
Thank you. Thanks, councillors. I propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the council meeting held on the 25th of May 2022 and the unscheduled meeting held on the 15th of June at 2:30 p.m. and the unscheduled council meeting held on the 15th of June at 3 p.m. Do I have a mover for those minutes? Councillor Hart. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bell. Is that to be opposed? No. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, can I call on a councillor to move the following procedural motion to alter the order of business so that we can move into closed session directly following the consideration of all items of the public meeting today? And there it is up on the... Councillor Potter will move it.
Yes, I'll move that. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, councillors, I'll now call for it. It's a procedural motion. It doesn't need a seconder. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.1, the LRCI projects. Councillor Potter, you've declared a conflict of interest, which you've just read out. I'll wait for you to leave the room. Okay. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider alternative projects to be delivered under the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Phase 3, following confirmation that Regional Development Victoria have approved funding for the Irrawillupi Wetlands development. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor McCracken.
Oh, when you're ready, Mayor, I'm happy to move I have a motion to move.
Thank you. Councillor Hart, you have a question?
Thanks, Mayor. My question's about the cost of this particular toilet block, $1.12 million. How does that compare with the cost of other toilet blocks that councils construct through the Shire? And I imagine you have an idea about the cost of building Kennet River. So I'm talking about the toilet block construction as distinct from the wastewater is a bit different down at Kennet River. So it just seems a very high cost for a toilet block.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor. Councillor, I don't have a direct comparison or a similar project that I'm aware of, particularly over the last couple of years, that I could use to draw on for an example for you. And similarly, I don't have the detail of cost associated with Kennet River project that's through City Deal. However, consideration is given to the varied service provision that is proposed for the public amenities block at Memorial Square. It does include a changing places facility as well, which does make it a different facility to what council typically provides.
Councillor White.
You just mentioned the changing places facility, and I understand that the local people, disability services and whatever were consulted in the development of that, and one organisation is willing to provide funding towards the project. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor. If the project is supported through this funding, then officers will further conversations with interested parties for the likes of either contribution or support that has been previously indicated. However, we haven't undertaken any formal conversations with interested parties to the date.
I think Councillor Costin was first.
Thank you, Mayor. The changing places facility, the cost of that, is that built into this estimate, this 1.12 million? Does that include the changing places facility, or is that separate? And the second question is, does the existing toilet block work? I mean, does it function okay?
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor. The cost estimate, the project allocation that's identified through the LRCI, so this report does include the changing places facility within the toilet amenity project. With regard to the whether the current toilet is functional, yes, it works.
Councillor Hart, I think you had a question, didn't you?
What Councillor Costin asked was what I was trying to find out. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Councillor McCracken, you said you had a motion to move.
Yeah, I'm just happy to move the recommendation, please.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Councillor White, is it to be opposed? Councillor Costin. Okay. Councillor McCracken is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, fairly straightforward one. This 1.2 odd million or thereabouts has come available because of a reallocation of other funding that's been available made to the Shire. So these two projects are very worthy, and I hope that we can support them.
Councillor White, as the seconder. You reserve. Councillor Costin, you opposed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm concerned about the cost of this project for something which is already functioning. But I also think we're looking at this through too narrow a lens, because there's actually more money available for projects, especially projects around Colac and surrounds. So there's not just the RDV 1.2 million, but there's also 2.5 million from the sale of Bruce Street. And given that we should be allocating our limited funds to the best possible outcomes for the community, I'm just a little bit concerned that if we allocate these funds to Colac-based projects and we're restricted on funding other projects outside of Colac and surrounds, that we seem to have a financial bias towards Colac projects. In fact, if we allocate these projects, this funding to the projects proposed here, that means of the total 6.8 million we've received for LRCI program funding, that's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, 6.8 million. Some 64% of that goes to Colac, just Colac. 24% goes to rural north, rural south, and only 13% will go to Great Ocean Road and our coast. Now, it seems to me that there is projects in other areas outside Colac that would achieve good outcomes for the community. And the one that springs to mind for me, of course, and it's no surprise, is the Apollo Bay Childcare Centre. We've discussed this many, many times over the years. It was first considered in 2016, and we were all excited that we were proposing an early years hub that had kindergarten, childcare, maternal and child health, and possibly even paediatric services in there. We considered it in the phase 1 funding, but we had concerns about the cost estimate at that time, which was fair enough, so we resolved to do some more work on the project. But we did resolve to provide in principle support to build the childcare component of the early years hub, and resolved to investigate funding sources to deliver the childcare component with an aim to have it in place by 2023. It was the first reserve project when we considered the LRCI Phase 2 funding in December 2021, I don't think that's the right month. The projects at that time were scored, and this project scored higher than other projects that did get into the fund, and the only reason was because once we allocated funds to the Irulpi Wetlands project, there wasn't sufficient remaining money to build the whole childcare centre. So we slipped it down as first reserve. It slipped down even further now, which is concerning, given that the Apollo Bay and the 4 neighbourhoods in the Apollo Bay area
Councillor.
childcare deserts. There's between 3.3 and 6 children compete for each childcare place in and around Apollo Bay. So let's stop going round and round the mulberry bush on this and be creative and see where we can find some funds for this worthwhile project. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. There's no doubt that the changing places part of this toilet block is an important project, but there seems to be some degree of confusion as to whether there might be funding available from another source from that. And I don't think that spending $1.12 million all on this project with that lack of clarity, I don't think that's the appropriate decision today. The other thing that concerns me is that the RSL committee did have concerns with the location of this particular toilet block within Memorial Square. Not saying that there shouldn't be one near Memorial Square. I think that's very important, and there is a functional one there at the moment, albeit one that needs attention. I don't think that this commitment is appropriate already today, particularly given those questions. And there are other items in the decision that was made in December 2021, other projects, Forest, Colac West, as well as the childcare that Councillor Costin has talked about, and also a Forest Street reconstruction in Colac. And I really think that Council needs to try to resolve the concern about the location of the toilets, needs to be quite clear as to what other funding is available before it determines to allocate this amount of money from this particular federal government grant. It seems to be the easy decision to just, oh well, federal government's paying, so we'll just give it the tick today.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor White, you reserved. Oh, you reserved, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there's been a lot of thought put into these projects, and we've had a lot of debate and discussion about them over a long period of time. We've had a lot of information to consider, and again, taking all that into account, I think the officers have done a pretty good job summing up the pros and cons of the projects, and that's why I want to support their recommendation. I absolutely agree about the childcare desert that Graham's talking about, and we will continue to look for funds and commit to that project. But I think at the moment these projects are ready to go, and I think there is an imperative around timeframes and getting them done. So I think we need to get on with it and approve these projects. These toilets, they're functional. but I would argue they're hardly fit for purpose. They're very shabby, they're very run down, and they certainly don't reflect well on our community and on our community pride. They're in a key location in our town, and they really are looking very, very past their use by date. So I would recommend the two projects that the officers have put up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCracken, you have a right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. I just note a few comments that were made. I guess the Bruce Street site's an interesting one because, from my understanding at least, it hasn't settled yet, so I don't think I wouldn't certainly be interested in banking on anything when we haven't got the money in the bank. Secondly, if we did reallocate all this money towards a project such as Apollo Bay Childcare Centre, this still wouldn't fund the project. It would only go part way. And that's a challenge with this because if you have a fraction of a project ready to go, it's actually probably likely to not be successful, and then the money is gone out of the community completely. So that's my hesitation in that one in particular. Because I'd rather the money from the federal government actually stay in here rather than be shipped back off to Canberra. The third point there about this financial bias towards Colac-based projects, so I just make a reminder out there that there was $20 million settled for the coast on coastal projects. So let's just remember that happened in the last few years, and that was certainly a big, strong push from a lot of councillors around this table. I was one of them. And 3 good projects down there as well, and we hope to see them come to fruition. So let's just clear up this little sort of fake news broadcast about, you know, a misallocation of funds that are sort of being pushed towards Colac. It's just not true.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 4-2.
Division.
Division is called. All those in favour? Councillor White, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell, Councillor Hanson. All those against? Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart. Thank you. Now get Councillor Potter back. I think Mr Surin's gone to get Councillor Potter. Thank you, Councillor Potter. Okay, now we move to item 10.2, the 2021-22 Budget Adjustments Capital Works Program. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement of project budget adjustments for 21-22 financial year for the capital program. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. This particular item shows where money has been taken from one particular project and given to another. Are any of the projects that have been defunded still required, or is it that the particular projects that have been defunded are no longer required? And if so, which ones that have been defunded still need to proceed? I think there's a software one that might be one of them. And how will that be addressed?
I might ask the CEO for a response.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hart, for your question. I'm happy to respond to this one. Yes, there is a software project that it refers, we call it Procure to Pay. It's a accounts payable and receivable processing, procurement processing module. We're not in a position to implement that at this time because it will require quite a lot of investment of officers' time in the finance team and change across pretty much the whole organisation. And at the moment we really need to direct our focus in some other places with finance. So that's really a resourcing one. We would like to bring that back to a conversation in the future, and then it will be assessed against other financial priorities at that time. But when we bring it back, we will make sure that we're ready to resource it and implement it at the time. We'd prefer not to hold the funds at this time if we can't put the project into implementation in effect. In relation to other projects, we have found a small number of projects that are not viable to proceed with the budget that they have, okay? And so really what we're recognising is that the project as envisaged is really not the project that we're now faced with delivering, and that's a sort of a material change on what council would have expected when they made the financial commitments. It is better practice often with project management to actually recognise that a project is not what you thought, and rather than just continue down a path to reshape that and add money to that, it's better to actually draw the line, recognise it, come back and reset with a more informed proposal. When we do that, the source of funding will depend on the project itself. If, for example, it's a renewal project, then it will be prioritised amongst other renewal projects in that program. If there is perhaps a different funding partner or it's a discretionary project, then that will be assessed against other financial priorities. So there are possibly about 100 lines in those tables. I understand I've only drawn one out specifically, but I hope that that response addresses your question, Councillor.
Are there any further questions from councillors? Councillor Costin.
I just wondering about the funds for our road slip program. Are they grant funds or are we funding them ourselves?
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor. The landslip program, as referenced in the documents, is council funded or council allocated budget.
Are there any further questions? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Potter, is there a seconder? Councillor Potter, you wish to move the...
I'd like to move the recommendations.
Okay,
my motion,
is there a
please.
seconder? Councillor McCracken, is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter is the mover.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Look, I was pleased to see this report. Councillor Hart might correct me, but I don't know if we've seen this report or in this form previously on council. I thought it was a great initiative. It keeps us up to date where we are, and it also keeps the community up to date where we are with some of these projects and budgets and work moving forward. So thanks for presenting this to us, and I'm assuming everyone's going to support it.
Councillor McCracken? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Just to respond to Councillor McCracken's comment about the City Deals projects, the funding for the City Deals project along the coast. I'll just highlight that in this Capital Works program, less than 5% of the projects, less than 5% of the funding is for along Great Ocean Road and along the coast. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.3, the asset plan for adoption. The purpose of this report is to present the asset plan to council for adoption following the exhibition period, seeking community feedback and submissions. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Okay, if there's no questions, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Potter?
Yes, Mayor, I'll move the recommendations motion, please.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, council is required to develop an asset plan as set out in the Local Government Act 2020, and here it is. And officers have put in a lot of work into this. I think this is actually a good thing to have to do. It forces us to look long-term at our assets, their serviceability and renewable, and link that in with our budget capability. So it's a great piece of work. I thank officers for the time they put in this, and this will be an asset plan that will prove valuable to Shire moving forward for the next 10 years.
Councillor White?
No, I need to reiterate what Councillor Potter has said, but also to say that it's a really good document for us as councillors to get a snapshot of what our assets are and where they're going. And for me, it's putting a focus on our open spaces and recreation and what we need to do in that space over the next few years.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, just to reinforce Councillor Potter's comments, this is a great plan, it's a great step forward. We're required to do it under the Local Government Act, but it's something that a lot of good organisations have been doing for some time, to have an asset plan to map out what their future costs are, what it costs to maintain their assets in the future, so they can set aside dollars in their financial plan. It's just plain good management, and it's good to see we've got to this stage. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.4, adoption of the 2022-23 budget, including fees and charges. The purpose of this report is to present the budget, including 2022-23 fees and charges for Council's consideration and adoption. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. The average rate increase is 1.75%. It's limited by our rate cap, but it's not an even 1.75% across all areas. So I'm just wondering if we have any indication of where that rate burden is moving to, either location or by rating category.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Costin. The movement of the rates is really determined by the movement of the valuation of properties. So I guess a couple of comments that I should make before I explain anything more is that the rating system is probably recognised. Our rating system isn't perfect, but it's what we have to work with. In the state government's report of some 12, 18 months ago now, they clearly stated that rates are a tax, a land tax, and so the land is taxed on its value. In the last 3-4 years, it's probably recognised that valuations along the coast have increased at a higher rate than other areas. But having said that, over a number of years, the movement in valuations can move away from the coast to farmland and other developing areas. So I guess in answer to your question, without sitting down and specifically calculating where they've moved to, it's probably reasonable to say that the movement will be to where valuations have increased at a higher rate.
Thank you. I'm tempted to ask a tougher question, but I'll let it go. Thank you.
I'm happy to take any question you have.
Okay. When we went out to our community engagement, both on the rate strategy and the budget, did we give any indication of the impact of changing valuations to our community?
Through the Mayor, specific indications of change in valuations, we do highlight that valuations are done annually, and there is an explanation around the effect of those valuations, and it is clearly stated in the budget document that the 1.75% increase is an average increase, and properties that increase at a higher rate could end up with a higher than 1.75% increase. But on the other hand, there may be properties across the differentials in the Shire that get a rate increase at a lesser than 1.75, and maybe even a reduction in their rates.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from councillors? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Doesn't the table on page 108 of the agenda, which lists the different categories, give some indication of where the rate burden is shifting, particularly with balance of Shire raising much more revenue in percentage terms compared to all of the other categories?
Through the Mayor, thanks for the question, Councillor Hart. Yes, you're correct. That is an indication on that page.
Councillor Hart.
Moving along in the agenda on page 122, it talks about a 9% increase in employee costs of $2 million. And when you go through this particular table, employee leaves gone up 76.6% and work cover 14.8%. I know there's an explanation elsewhere about some increase in the people for home services, but could we get some sort of explanation as to why employee leave would have gone up 76.6% and why work cover premiums would have gone up 14.8%? It's on page 122.
Through the Mayor, I would like to just explain that. The increase in the employee cost, there are a few reasons. So some of them is our contractor and the consultant agency fees has been reduced. So if you can see the table underneath 4.1.8, which is materials and services, so the large amount of increase in the employee cost actually has been offset by the decrease in the consultant agency cost. Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up question to that?
Thanks. Yeah, that's good to see, and I appreciate that is part of the explanation. But I'm still a bit puzzled about the 76.6% increase in employee leave and the 14.8% in work cover. And it might be that for some reason the insurance has gone up, which you can probably guess my next question will be, well, why? Was that because council did something? So there are two figures on 4.1.7 on page 122, employee leave and work cover, and if it was due to something council did or didn't do, what was it that led to, in broad terms, what was it that led to the work cover increase?
I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Councillor Hart, and thanks, Amanda, Manager of Finance, but I'm happy maybe to quickly address the work cover one. Okay, so work cover is quite complex, challenging whenever we're talking about some form of insurance. And our work cover costs are not just directly attributable to things that we do or experience in our own council. There's also actually an industry element of that. So the claims, for example, the history and trends in claims over the last 2 or 3 years across the sector, that can influence our costs, as can actually direct matters that have occurred within our own workforce, okay? So I just flag that they can actually go up and down for a range of reasons. So that's one thing that factors into our escalated costs, because over time, particularly in the last few years, we know that there have been a significant number of general claims in the workplace as people have really struggled. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of things like that, okay? So we're part of getting caught up in part of that. And then there will also be an element that reflects perhaps our own direct history. And I would also, just to be clear, also acknowledge that we have informed this budget by previous actual costs, more so than previous budget allocations. Okay, so we've tried to not just budget based on what we budgeted in the past, but actually what our work cover has cost us in the past. That's been higher. We've made an adjustment to have a more correct reflection of that in this upcoming budget. The leave provisions, similarly, we've taken a much more rigorous look at actual leave over the last few years, not just budgeted leave, and then also the shift from contractors to staff, the shift of project-funded staff, the shift of the additional aged care staff, etc. The leave provisions also have to be accommodated for those as well. So there's a number of things there. Really, the overall driver is to more accurately reflect what we believe the budget needs to be next year to cover it, based on more of a first principles and a look at our actual costs, rather than a budget-to-budget build. I hope that answers that.
Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry for raising this at this late stage, but I just was made aware earlier on that we're proposing to spend $35,000 in this budget on carbon offsets. Our current expenditure, I think, is $26,000, so it's quite a increase, 30 something percent. But we have a resolution to reduce our reliance on carbon offsets. So if we have a resolution to reduce our reliance on carbon offsets, why are we allowing more money in this coming year?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. I believe it's an extra increase in the scope and categories next year going forward. So rather than retaining the same level this year, we're actually moving forward.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. There was a budget submission in relation to funding for some roadworks on the Colac Lawn Road at Botels Hill. Whilst not mentioned specifically in the budget, I'm just wondering if it's possible to get any indication whether that will be addressed as part of our normal road maintenance in the coming year.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. I'm not aware of that particular road, but I'll take it on notice and I can get back to you on that.
Yep. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. A similar question in relation to submissions. We had a submission in relation to funding for the Visitor Information Centre, and we heard from the CEO in relation to that, but can I just have confirmation that within the budget there is some funding to support the VIC if we're going to open it or do something along those lines with visitor information services?
Through you, Mayor, yes, that is correct. There's still budget for the Colac VIC.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Potter. Is there a seconder? Oh, Councillor Potter, sorry.
I'm on a roll, Mayor.
Yeah.
I would like to move the officer's recommendation as a motion, please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Won't speak too long. I guess mainly want to speak to about the process and leave it up to other councillors to point out some of the pros and I guess some of the cons if they're in there. But firstly, officers and councillors started working on this before Christmas. It's been a long process to get to this point. But the stages we went through were well laid out for the year. There was great discussion and I felt the quality of documents that were presented to us by officers was was very good and an improvement, and the willingness of officers to model some of the scenarios councillors wanted to look at in their deliberations was outstanding. So I really want to thank the officers for their work on this. Look, as part of that process, councillors are invited to submit business cases for some projects or whatever throughout the Shire, and some of us, or most of us, did that. And unfortunately, given our financial constraints, it's not often able to accommodate what we probably wanted. And, you know, for example, EV chargers and Harris Street Bridge and some playground equipment in Stoddart Street were some of the things I threw into the mix. We can't always get our own way, unfortunately, due to the financial constraints that we're under. And I think things are going to get a little bit tighter moving down the track. And I think sooner or later we need to have a conversation with our community around our core services, what services we provide, services we may be able to adjust. But that's a conversation we have to have with the community, and they can tell us what their expectations are given the financial limitations that we're under. But commend councillor and staff work on the budget, and there are, you know, a few highlights, and draw your attention to page 65. I think there's been a couple of questions around employee costs already. We often get asked about employee costs, but in the main, I'm very happy with the budget given the situation we find ourselves in. And as I said, I encourage other councillors to talk to certain points if they wish to.
Councillor Costin, you were the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a good budget document. It's quite complex, but it sets the direction for other documents, our annual plan and other such strategies for the future. So thank you, Anne, Neril, Amanda, and anyone else who had involvement in here, and particularly thank you to those who put written submissions in. But it's a good document. Running a business like Colac Otway Shire is a very complex business. It's much more complex than operating just a single service business that might be $50 million or so. This mightn't be as big, but it's an extremely complex business, and the budget will help guide it through to the next financial year. Thank you, everyone.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell, then Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to echo the thoughts of Councillor Potter and Councillor Costin. I think it is a complicated or complex document that aims to take in a very broad range of projects and community considerations, and I think the task to enable that is a really difficult one. I know from my point of view, I agree with Councillor Potter that I think the process was really open and transparent for both the councillors and the community. And I think that is a good template for future years as well, which I hope we continue with. Obviously, there were a number of submissions that were put forward, and I'd like to thank both the public and people from within the Colac Otway Shire for those. I think that they've been acknowledged, or hopefully they've been acknowledged well, and that you know, your ability to access information with regards to the budget was adequate, as it should be. I believe that it was. So I'm happy with this budget. I think it demonstrates a broad and also in places specific needs to the community, and outlines a good template for the future. So I'm certainly very supportive of this. Oh, I should also point out that thank you very much for the staff who've compiled a lot of data and a lot of time as well to create this very in-depth document. So thank you.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to thank the community for their submissions to this budget. I think it's a bit unfortunate that the budget hasn't been in a position to accommodate some of those requests, and I'd like to see those submissions still considered when we're discussing the next budget, or a half-yearly review where they're still relevant, reflect relevant issues. On the rates, there is a rate cap of 1.75%, but that's on the average rate bill. And you can see from the table in page 108 that due to valuations, there's going to be a significant shift of the rate burden to the residential balances Shire rate category. That doesn't tell you exactly where, but that category includes properties from the coast through to Cressy, Birregurra, Forest, and basically every rural area outside of Colac. On the employee costs, there has been a significant increase in employee costs, but some of that is due to moving away from agency staff, and I think that can be a good thing, and also some extra home care packages which reflect on the revenue side. So there's more to the employee costs than first meets the eye, and I think it's very useful. Not only do I thank the council staff involved with the preparation of this, but we've had some relatively new people in finance. We've had a new CEO, and I think this budget process has benefited from fresh sets of eyes from the management side of the equation, and I hope that perhaps the employee costs there'll be a bit more rigour in those in this budget compared perhaps with some budgets in the past.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No? Okay, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Thank you. Just before we move on to the next item, I'd just like to say thank you to our General Manager of Corporate Services, Mr Errol Lawrence, who is leaving the Colac Otway Shire after nearly 5 years of service. He started not long after a number of us got onto council, so we've sort of ridden the journey, the ups and downs and the roller coaster together, and I'd like to thank you very much for your years of service and the work that you've put in, and wish you all the best for the future. So thanks very much. Okay, now we move to item 10.5, the 2022-23 annual plan. The purpose of this report is to present the 22-23 annual plan to council for endorsement. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I couldn't let that opportunity go by. In our council plan, under the Environment Sustainability Objective, number priority 2.2.1 is to reduce our carbon emissions and reduce our annual expenditure on offsets. But I don't see any actions in the 22-23 annual plan. Are we looking to do this work in future years? Take it on notice, if you like.
Thanks, Councillor, through the Mayor. Yes, we'll take it on notice and come back, but as has already been referred to earlier tonight, the environment strategy will also inform the development of a climate action plan, which will include much more focused attention to what are the actions available to reduce carbon emissions. Given that we haven't identified anything specific this time, we haven't asked for any budget, and therefore we haven't put a specific project in there, but I'm really looking forward to the plan informing those opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor McCracken. You're moving the recommendation? Yeah, and Councillor White as the seconder. Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor McCracken is the mover. Okay. Councillor White?
Are you sure you don't need to speak, Joe? Okay, I'll just say that, again, to recognise the work and congratulate the staff, and I think it gives us a really good basis going forward.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Just to highlight that in my notice of motion later on, I've proposed an action to go into the annual plan. So if that notice of motion is passed, there'll be an additional action to go in.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. All right. Okay, now we move to item 10.6, the Colac Otway Shire Grants Program, 2022-23, Allocation of Funds. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider the proposed allocation of funds through the 22-23 Colac Otway Shire Grants Program. Now, I note that Councillor Costin has a conflict of interest for this item.
I've got a conflict of interest in relation to part 2 of the resolution, because it includes some projects auspiced by the Apollo Bay Chamber of Commerce, and I received a disclosable gift from the Apollo Bay Chamber of Commerce for my election campaign.
All right, thank you, Councillor Costin. So I think we're going to move to do the parts of the agenda that deal with. We're going to actually do part 2 first. There we go. There it is up on the screen. So we'll ask you to leave the room. Thank you. Okay. Do councillors have any questions of officers relating to part 2? Okay. If there's no questions, then Councillor McCracken is happy to move part 2, the motion up on the screen. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hart. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor McCracken is the mover. Speaking, Councillor Hart, you seconded? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. All right, then I'll call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 6-0. All right, we'll now call Councillor Costin back to deal with the other items, which is the other categories of the grant program. All right, do councillors have any questions of officers relating to these categories? I think it's category 1 and 3 through to 5 or 6. Are there any questions? All right, there's no questions of officers. I'll ask for a mover of the recommendation. Councillor Potter, Councillor McCracken as the seconder. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. And I guess I'm preempting hands in the air, but look, one of the best jobs on council is to allocate funding to various community groups, sporting groups and so forth across the Shire. And I'd like to congratulate those people who have, or those groups that have put in for the grant applications, and they're widespread across the Shire. And can I mention groups we don't hear from very often, the Cressy Bowling Club or Cressy Historical Society, Carlisle River Cricket Club, Jellybrand Public Hall, just a few examples of the widespread across the Shire of groups taking up the opportunity to apply for and hopefully be successful in grant applications. Big thanks to Grants Officer Katrina Keogh and her boss, I guess, James Meyer. It's not easy work putting all this together, and she does a very good job, and she's well regarded by the community. I do think we have to look at some of our processes, but we can consider that during the year. But again, thanks to everyone who applied. I note there's about $76,000 allocated to Colac, and balance of Shire was about $213,000. So it just shows that the that this money is spread across the Shire, and it's not Colac-centric by any means, and nor should it be, of course. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Forgotten Councillor McCracken as a seconder? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to propose a small amendment, if I could, to Part 6, point 4, is it? Which authorises the CEO under delegation to approve grants. I'd like to focus the approval of grants on the areas that were very undersubscribed, and that's in particular Category 5, which is small business environmental sustainability. So I'd like to insert the words after 14,311, insert the words for Category 5 projects, the Small Businesses Environmental Sustainability Program, and then carry on subject to applications.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hart, is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter, Councillor Costin as the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. It's pretty straightforward. Sorry, Chris?
Sorry, Mayor. Councillor McCracken raised a point with me. Can I oppose it as the mover of...
Oh, you did, sorry. That's right. Yes.
So I got a bit excited.
I got confused. Yes, because you were the mover and... Sorry, I didn't write it down. And who was the seconder? Joe. Okay. Is it to be opposed? The amendment, yeah. No. Okay, Councillor Costin's the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you to the officers for preparing this grant program and for the recommendations on allocation of funds. The Category 5, which is the small business environmental sustainability category, is a bit of a worry. We allocated $25,000 in the budget to that category, and we only received applications for 4,979. I feel there's untapped applications out there, and if we specifically targeted that category, that we might get more applications, and that might meet some of our environmental objectives in our council plan. Thank you.
Councillor Hart, you were the seconder.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. As was said by Councillor Costin, this particular category was undersubscribed by approximately $20,000. Some of that money has been used to allow grants to be approved for the other categories above the levels of budget allocation, and I'm entirely fine with that. But I think with this $14,000, it should be focused on this particular category to try to elicit applications. And if it is that doesn't elicit more applications, and I think there must be plenty of projects and ideas that could benefit from this grant category. And if that doesn't happen, then that information should feed into the guidelines for the future. So rather than just ignoring this undersubscription, this would mean we would, at least for this year, try to tease out whether there are potential applications for this category that haven't been considered. And if not, well, then that of itself would give us information for future grant guidelines. And I would hope that if this is passed, that Council might make some more direct contact. It's quite a puzzle as to why this is so undersubscribed. So we allowed 25,000, 20,000 undersubscribed, that's 80% undersubscribed. So what is it about this category that people aren't aware that they can apply for grants from Council?
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I won't be supporting this. Reason being is because why would you put all the additional money into one area when it could be put into all areas? And I think it's a really dangerous idea to limit it just to one category, particularly a category that's undersubscribed. If there was an oversubscription, I could understand why you would do that, but it's, as quite rightly pointed out, it's about 80% undersubscribed. So wouldn't it be more prudent to give everyone the opportunity to make an application under all the different categories? And then once you have all the information, you can then decide, okay, well, we can make a decision from there. If you exclude all the other categories and only do it with one, you're basically saying, well, we don't care about all the other stuff, we just want to focus on this. And I don't think we should be saying that to our community. We're basically saying, well, we only want grants in this area that we're going to hand out. We don't want anything to do with facade improvements. We don't want anything to do with small grant programs. We don't want anything to do with community events. We don't want anything to do with any other Category 1 grants either. We should be broader than this, and I'd hope that perhaps part of the campaign for when this money does go out again might be trying to elicit more applications for all categories, not just one. So I wouldn't want to be exclusive like that. You should try and be inclusive.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell. Did you want to speak, Councillor White? Oh, did you have your hand up? Oh, yeah, Councillor White and then Councillor Bell.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I just want to say I think I get really excited looking at the broad range of applicants and the broad range of projects, and it must be an enormous task for the staff to sift through all the applications and come up with a report that's so succinct. I do look through this and see a number of what I regard as, under $3,000 projects and wonder whether down the track we can have a look at the administrative burden of managing those and whether or not there's some efficiencies for staff in...
I'll just remind you, we are just debating the amendment.
Sorry. So I guess that's... Yeah.
All right. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Matt. I won't say too much, but I think in regard to Councillor Costin's amendment, look, I can certainly see where you're coming from. I think it's reasonable to try and give a category that is undersubscribed a bit of a leg up, but it's possible at the same time you're taking away the opportunity that was always given to them, or you're taking away other opportunities from other categories that was always an opportunity within Category 5. So perhaps there's an element of fairness that's taken away. I think as it stands with point 4, I think the opportunity within point 4 already gives Category 5 the opportunity to receive the additional or the leftover funds of $14,000. So I think, to that end, it already goes a fair way to already achieving what the amendment is trying to achieve. So for a matter of fairness, I won't be supporting the amendment.
You've already spoken, though.
I can't speak again?
No.
Sorry, because I was in the wrong place before.
Yeah.
But that's all right.
All right, councillors, I'll now call... I guess it sort of has been opposed, so Councillor Costin, I will be generous and give you a short right of reply, seeing it has sort of been opposed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure what to say now.
You don't have to say anything.
But I will say something. Look, I take the point of other councillors that they would like to see the 14,000 distributed across other areas. I personally think that this category probably got lost in amongst all the other categories because it's a complex process applying here and knowing what category you're eligible for or not, and this one probably got lost. Some of the other categories are oversubscribed and we have allocated additional funds to them. I think I'd like to see us focus on this one so that we can tease out if there is any unmet demand there that we don't know about that will help us in our future revision of the guidelines. And of course, this particular category helps us along the way to reduce carbon emissions, which is part of our commitment in the Council Plan 2.2.2, actually, to support the community to reduce carbon emissions. So this follows that priority objective there. And so for those two reasons, the fact that it might have got lost in the whole process, and two, to give the opportunity to others in our community to reduce emissions. That's why I'm proposing the amendment. Thanks.
Thank you, councillors. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The amendment is lost. 3-4. Division. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor White, Councillor Hart. All those against? Councillor Potter, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell, Councillor Hanson. All right, so we now move back to Councillor Potter. You've spoken. Councillor McCracken, you didn't speak, did you? Yeah, okay. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like you to please split Part 6 off separately, so we deal with all the other relevant parts and then deal with Part 6 as a standalone resolution. And of course, you have the discretion to do that.
So I'm just trying to understand why you want that done.
Obviously, there's two different things going on here. There's a whole lot of grants, which I fully support, and there's a different issue as to how you deal with the remainder funds. And I think it's open to you to split, and the practice in the past has been that that generally if there's that request that you split it and deal with it as two separate issues. So Part 6 would be a standalone resolution and all the other parts would be granting the grants. They're quite two different things.
I'll split the parts 1 to 5, is it? But not 2, 1 to 3 to 5, which for the vote, yes. And then we can vote separately on point 6.
And I haven't spoken yet. I've only spoken on an amendment.
So the mover and the seconder have spoken or chosen not to speak. Councillor Hart.
I'd just like to thank the community for their various applications and are pleased to be able to support the particular grants under those different categories.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak on parts 1, 3, 4 and 5? Councillor White.
Only what I said before. Sorry.
All right. Okay. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote on parts 1, 3, 4 and 5. All those in favour? The item's carried 6-0. 7-0, sorry. We were all in the room. We got confused. And now we will vote on part 6. Okay, I'll now call for a vote on part 6.
So, sorry to be a pest, Mayor, but I take it you're recording the mover and the seconder the same as the other one, is that right?
Yes, we had a mover and a seconder of the other motion, that's right, as a whole. Yep. Okay, and I'll now call for a vote on part 6. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 4-3. Division. All those in favour? Councillor Potter, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell, Councillor Hanson. All those against? Councillor Hart, Councillor White, Councillor Costin. And I think councillors, we might call a short break there for 10 minutes. We'll have to call it a day. Not yet. Okay, councillors, thank you. All right, okay, now we move to item 10.7, the Local Sports Infrastructure Fund mid-year round. The purpose of this report is to seek council support to apply for funding to the Victorian Government's 2022 Local Sports Infrastructure Fund. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No? If there's no questions of officers and councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report. Does any council wish to move a motion? Councillor Potter. You move the motion?
I'll move the recommendation as a motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay,
Pleased to do
is
so.
there a seconder? Councillor Bell, is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I was really pleased to see this on our agenda, Mayor. The facilities out at the Irwilpie Recreation Reserve are well below standard, less than satisfactory, and in fact were highlighted as part of the AFL Barwon region assessment of facilities across the region. So it's good to see this in front of us. I thank you, the officers, for putting this up, and I hope this is a start of an improvement to the facilities out there. And they're not just football, netball club facilities, they're community facilities, and possibly an area of last resort during the fire season and so forth, and we need to commit to a bit of an upgrade there. So thank you, staff.
Councillor Bell is the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to echo Councillor Potter's views. It's a good opportunity, and yeah, absolutely support this recommendation.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. This is good to see. The facilities are out there at the moment, the same facilities that were out there when I was 16 years old, playing football, 100 years ago, just about. And it's good to see that we're looking to improve them, and it must have been cold out there at training this week. I just highlight perhaps that we've heard a bit of chatter lately, and we had a question today about whether our shire, our municipality, would take over the Apollo Bay Recreation Reserve. And I think you'd have to say why, but for the people who have sports at those reserves, this is part of the reason, so that council can help them apply for grants also, which they struggle with at the moment. They feel a bit left alone. They certainly don't get much help from GORCAPA in relation to sports facilities. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.8, consideration of panel report, Birregurra Flood Study Amendment C116 COLA. The purpose of this item is to consider the panel report received for Colac Otway Planning Scheme Amendment C116 COLA on the 30th of May 2022 and seek to adopt the amendment and forward it to the Minister for Planning for approval. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Okay, all right, if there's no questions of officers, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor White, Councillor McCracken as a seconder. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor White as the mover.
Too much. All I've got to say is that we've had a thorough and very comprehensive look at this, and it's been a lot of work, and it's great that we've got to this point.
Councillor McCracken? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay. Now we move to item 10.9, the Community Engagement Policy Adoption. The purpose of this report is to consider the reviewed Community Engagement Policy following completion of the public exhibition process. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Okay, if there's no questions of officers, councillors, I'll now call for a motion in regards to this matter. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Costin. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bell. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Costin as the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. Policies like this are a great thing to see. The very reason we exist as a council is because of our community, and we need to understand as much as we can what the community is thinking and what its preferences and priorities and aspirations are. And I'll just highlight a couple of things that are in there. Principle 2 is that the community being engaged will have access to accurate and impartial information about how community members may be affected by proposed decisions, and we need to make sure we are providing those opportunities. On page 5 it says Council is committed to ensuring community engagement is integrated into our core business to support decision making, and that the level of community engagement is determined by who is impacted by a decision, the extent of that impact, and the consideration of community concerns. I think we need to be mindful of that in some of the decisions we make. And on page 6, it also highlights that under the heading Consult Before Decision Making, it says it's important to talk to the community before decisions are made. And it goes on to say that if decisions have already been made, it's important to inform the community on why those decisions were made. So I look forward to the adoption of this policy, but I'd just like to make the point that it needs to be more than a policy. It needs to be something we embrace and endorse and use every day as we're making decisions. Thank you.
Councillor Bell as a seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. No, I agree with Councillor Costin with those comments. I think it probably is more than just a policy. It's something that we as an organisation and the community should rely on to engage on a whole level of different issues and concerns within the community. So hopefully that narrative can be or can continue to be marketed out there, and people understand that it's there and available for their consumption. I note that it's it's been recently reviewed and put out for public consultation, and there were no submissions. So I'm comfortable that we're now in a position where it can be used, hopefully effectively, and with access. And we come back again in 4 years' time. So I'm happy to support this recommendation in front of us.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor White.
Just to say that in the last week I've been to 2 sessions where community engagement has been undertaken with the community with very important, the environment strategy was one, and the community infrastructure plan for Apollo Bay was the other. And just to say that I was really impressed with the way that the council officers had gone about setting out their community engagement with the people that were coming in to ask questions, and I thought it represented our council really well, and I was really proud to be part of the council and those community engagement sessions, which underpins this policy and is really important policy for us as a council.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.10, Committee's Policy for Adoption. The purpose of this report is to consider the draft committee's policy. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Colac Otway Shire has a position that all committees running halls and light facilities should be forced into management agreements where those facilities are owned by Colac Otway Shire. I know that during the COVID issues, Council held off forcing that issue, but is it still Council's position to force hall committees into entering into management agreements even when they don't want to, or is council happy to keep them as community asset committees?
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Hart. The intention of this framework is to use it as an assessment tool, if you like, and a guide to look at all of the committee types and see whether or not they're still actually suitable and relevant. With regard to the community asset committees, the intention is to actually to liaise with them and seek or to prepare, I guess, information and resources to actually assist them in their reporting, etc. There isn't any specific reason that we would force people into management agreements, but there might be conditions that the CEO would put in place in relation to the instrument or the authorisation that she would have. And that would be done in negotiation with committees.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. That sounds like it's heading in the right direction. So another part of that was to force hall committees and the like into being associations. That's an adopted position of council. It's not one I agree with. Do I take it that council will not be proceeding to say to committees, well, you have to become an association rather than a community asset committee?
Thank you, Councillor. I think they're quite separate things. So whether a committee is an incorporated association is actually separate to the Community Asset Committee. So no, my view would be that we wouldn't be forcing people to become incorporated associations.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. On this issue, and it certainly sounds like perhaps the broader council has had a change of heart, and that's a good thing. The various hall committees had to be reappointed in a bit of a rush a couple of years ago due to a change of the Local Government Act. And I believe that appointment might expire on 31st of December 2022. So what steps is council going to take to reappoint members to various community asset committees? Might it be a temporary reappointment, or does council have a plan to have elections across many different committees over a period of time? What's the plan there, please?
So the intention as part of this review will be to meet with each of the community asset committees to reconfirm their membership and then bring that to council for endorsement. And there would be no, if I can just make that point, there'd be no sunset clause on that. So if council, depending on how they voted to change their membership, they would advise council and then that would come through the chamber accordingly.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor, and these answers sound like council is heading in the right direction, as I say. Does council management think that it would be prudent to formally overturn or supersede the various resolutions that are still current, which give a direction by council resolution that all community asset committees are to become associations managing various buildings by signed agreements? So I appreciate that council management sounds like they're heading in the right direction, and it's certainly a change on a few years ago, but that's still an adopted position of council, and one I hasten to add, didn't agree with it then and don't agree with it now.
Yeah, so through the Mayor, I'm happy to respond, Councillor Hart. So before we lock in the way forward, I just will make sure that we give a commitment to go back and read very carefully what the resolutions are, because they may or may not need to be superseded. We might be able to build upon them with a conversation to redirect, have that endorsed by council. So I don't know if they need to be revoked or changed, because I'm going to have to take that on notice. I have looked at them and I don't recall anything that constrained us in where I believe we need to go through conversation with councillors and community. That's my recollection.
Okay, are there any further questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Hart. We move the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm pleased with the answers of those questions we got on these various policies. What has happened is was a Local Government Act changed in 2020. There's been suggestions that various policies be amalgamated into one, and I would like to thank people who have made comments on that proposal. Today we're adopting that, and I'm prepared to support it. This is a lot better place today in relation to hall committees and the like. People give considerable time, and I'm hearing from those answers a more supportive approach by council management, and I'm pleased to hear that, and that's part of the reason why we'll support this today. But I do think, and I appreciate the comments made by the CEO, that we do need to have a look at the resolutions that were adopted, which did try to force committees to become associations and sign management agreements, and at least one group did that. And certainly I had a lot of feedback from different people across the municipality who didn't like the way they were being treated by council. So if that's no longer going to be the process, and it sounds like it isn't, then it might be that we need to tidy up the various directions that have been given to council management, if necessary, so that it's clear that that course is no longer the current course. Because these people give a lot of their time, they don't need the extra burden of stress of being told you have to form an association and start signing management agreements. Of course there's going to be rules about what they can and can't do, but I think it's good to hear if we're more supportive than council perhaps was about 2 years ago.
Councillor Potter, it's a second to no. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.11, Bluewater Consulting Room Lease. The purpose of this report is to recommend to grant a lease for the Bluewater Leisure Centre consulting rooms following an expression of interest process. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My question is whether the officers have any particular, or whether management has any particular objection if the term of the lease was to be 2 years longer than it is by having an extra option, and do they have any concerns with a particular tenant, or has this tenant been quite good to deal with and quite reasonable? So that's the question.
Through you, Mayor, we have no concerns with the tenant. As such, we've recommended this recommendation today, and we have no concerns with an extra 2 years on the lease if that's the way councillors wish to proceed.
Councillor Hart.
I just flag an alternative when you're ready, Mayor.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Hart, you flagged that you've got a motion to move. It's up on the screen.
Oh, it's up on the screen. It's great how things are operating lately. Yes, essentially it is 2 2-year extensions rather than one. So potentially the lease could be as long as 7 years rather than 5.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'll be brief on this, but I think with this sort of thing, what I'm trying to do is trying to balance the interest of the council, but also the interest of the business owner, who has indicated they'd prefer a longer lease if possible. This will still, at each option period, will require council management to check that everything's been going along as it should. And from what we hear, there's no concerns with this particular tenant. It gives them a bit more security for their business and is somewhat more straightforward for council in that it might mean that it's 2 years longer than it before it has to be reviewed. It's just trying to get a balance between those different interests.
Councillor Potter, is the seconder?
No, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. And now we move to item 10.12, the contract 2212, design and construct Bluewater pool roof replacement. The purpose of this report is to award the contract for the Bluewater pool roof replacement and design and construct tender. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No? All right, if there's no questions, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation before us. It's a revised officer recommendation, which is up on the screen. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Costin, is it to be seconded? Councillor Bell, is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Costin is the mover. Councillor Bell?
No, nothing to say.
No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.13, the contract 2122, Port of Apollo Bay Breakwater Remediation Project, the sheet pile wall. The purpose of this report is to obtain council endorsement to award the contract for the break wall remediation project sheet pile wall at the Port of Apollo Bay. And we've got a revised officer recommendation which is up on the screen. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Could we get an explanation as to essentially what this change, what it means in plain language? What is it trying to address?
Through the Mayor, thanks Councillor Hart. I'm very happy to provide context to this. This contract that we're recommending that Council award tonight, it will take a number of months to deliver, and therefore the construction and contract period will actually span across a period where the Port of Apollo Bay operations, which we currently manage as a contractor to the Department of Transport, will actually transition from Council being the operator to the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority. As the operator, Council has supported that formally through resolution, and we've been working with the authority to implement that, recognising that when that transition occurs, this project will be live, this contract will be live. We've got legal advice confirming that we'll be able to novate the contract as the principal from Council to the authority, and we'll make sure that the financial capacity is there to fulfil the contract obligations, etc. The authority have been in discussion about this proposal. They're just refining some things on their side. They're just asking a few questions that we believe will be quickly answered, but we're seeking Council to support the award of the contract, very transparently noting that this novation is planned during this period.
Are there any further questions? The councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation in relation to this. Councillor Potter, you'll be the mover.
Yeah, I'll move the recommendation as my motion, please.
Yeah, and Councillor Costin as a seconder. All right, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, this is a very important project and an important contract to award so that work can commence as soon as possible on repairing damage to breakwater down at Port of Apollo Bay. The port, as we all know, it's a working harbour. It needs to stay in operation, and we can't afford to let the damage progress. So it made a lot of sense to bring this before us now. I hope everyone will support it, and the inclusion around the transfer of the contract to Gore Kappa was sensible, but I'm glad we didn't have to wait until we got that agreement in writing. I think it's sensible to get this done here and now and get the contractors put to work. I just want to thank staff for the work they did in preparing the tender and the grant application to get the money from Department of Transport. Simon Macbeth does a great job at the harbour, and this was critical to its ongoing operation. So thanks to him, and hopefully, I'm sure everyone will just support this.
Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Just endorsing Councillor Potter's words. And applauding the professionalism of the staff down there and looking at what is needed to maintain the harbour from so long ago. In fact, you might say they've implemented their own asset management plan going back some years now, so they didn't wait till something failed before preparing a contract and chasing funding and preparing a contract to undertake essential refurbishment and maintenance works. So well done to the staff for looking ahead, and yes, I endorse this contract. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.14, the contract 2218 internal audit services. The purpose of this report is to provide council with information regarding the tender for contract 2218 internal audit services and the appointment of an internal auditor. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No. If there's no questions, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor McCracken. Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken is the mover. No. Councillor Costin? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Okay, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.15, Council's power contract. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider accepting the Victorian Energy Collaboration offer for the supply of 100% green power through the retailer Red Energy. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No, if there's no questions, Councillor McCracken will move the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bell, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor McCracken is the mover. No. Councillor Bell? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Yeah, sorry, Mayor, sorry to disappoint other councillors. But yeah, look, just quickly, I'd like to thank the officers for their work on this. This is a very good outcome for this Shire. And obtaining energy through retailer Red Energy, an Australian company operating the Snowy Hydro scheme. So this is a very, very good outcome for Shire, and I thank officers for what they've presented to us.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.16, Procurement Australia Insurance Tender Assessment Report. The purpose of the report is to present the request for proposal assessment report from Procurement Australia and award a 2-year contract for Council's insurance broking and risk management services. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Okay. Councillor McCracken's happy to move the recommendation if there's no questions. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bell, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor McCracken is the mover. No. Councillor Bell? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. All right, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.17, the Audit and Risk Committee minutes. 9th of Feb 2022. The purpose of the report is to provide for information the Colac Otway Shire Audit and Risk Committee minutes dated the 9th of February 2022. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I note that these are the February 2022 Audit Committee minutes, and it refers to, I think it's on page 417. Yes, that's right, it is on page 417. A request for a report in May 2022 about what actions Council has taken to implement the response arising from the Victorian Auditor General's report into Colac Otway Shire's sexual harassment survey result. So the question is, what was the outcome of that report, and what can Council tell us about progress on the issues identified by that Victorian Auditor General report survey?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Hart, it's an important question, so I'm very happy to provide a response. However, I can't recall the February detail at this time, so I'm going to take that on notice. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? So, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation before us. Does any councillor wish to move the recommendation or another motion? Or a motion? Councillor Costin, you move the recommendation. Is it to be seconded? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Costin is the mover. No. Councillor White? No. All right. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay. Now we move to item 10.18. S6, Instrument of Delegation, Council to Staff. The purpose of the report is to present the revised Section 6 Instrument of Delegation from Council to members of staff for each of the relevant acts and regulations, which has been reviewed and updated to reflect organisation structural changes, which come into effect on the 1st of July 2022. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No. All right, there's no questions. Councillors, the officers have provided, you'll move the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor White, is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken is the mover. No. Councillor White? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.19, Notice of Motion, Battery Electric Vehicle Charger, Apollo Bay. The purpose of the report is to consider Councillor Costin's Notice of Motion, which is up on the screen, regarding battery electric vehicle chargers in Apollo Bay. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Or regarding, or of Councillor Costin, it's his motion. Councillor Potter.
Question of officers, if I may, Mayor. If this motion is passed, will it have any meaningful effect on progressing this project, given that we have been working on this and continue to work on this, and we're approaching an outcome?
Through the Mayor, thanks for the question, Councillor Potter. The officers will continue to work in securing a lease to enable a private entity to install charging stations. The passing of the notice of motion won't impede or change the commitment that we have to seeing this matter through.
Are there any other questions? Can I just ask one question about the make it operational for the 22-23 Christmas New Year holiday season? Is that 100% in council's control, or is it also reliant on other agencies?
Thanks for the question, Mayor. The ability for council to influence the timing for the charging stations to be operational is limited to the exercising and of the lease. For the licence, the installation and the speed in which that occurs does rest with the licensee.
Are there any further questions? So, Councillor Costin, you're the mover. Is there a seconder for Councillor Costin's motion? Councillor Hart, is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter. All right, Councillor Costin is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought everyone would be in favour of this, so I'm surprised to see someone is not agreeing with it. The Victorian Government Charging the Destinations program identified a gap along the Great Ocean Road, a large gap for fast chargers. That gap, it constrains our coastal economy a bit. It means that people with battery electric vehicles struggle to drive along the coast and through to the 12 Apostles and back again without getting a charge. It's also constraining the electrification of our small vehicle fleet, so we're forced to rely on hybrids because we can't fast charge full electric vehicles down the coast. About 2 years ago, we received an offer, a substantial offer, very substantial offer to install 2 chargers in one of our car parks. The proponent, the person who made that offer, wanted to use our car parks to install 2 chargers, and he would get a return on his investment from the sale of electricity. He's since partnered with the reputable ChangeFox organisation and received a destination charging across Victoria grant, and that the involvement of ChargeFox adds considerable comfort to us because they've established partnerships with councils across Australia. We were initially cautious due to our limited experience, and we didn't quite understand who paid for the electricity and how it would all work at that time. And so we haven't pushed this along as fast as some in our community would like to see it move along. But it's got to the stage now where it's time to formally respond and to make a commitment that we commit in principle, and that's what we don't have as yet, and that's the purpose of the motion, to commit in principle to partnering with this proponent to provide 2 chargers, and commit in principle to providing 2 parking spots for this, and to set a target date, because we don't have a target date as yet also. So to stop this drifting along, it's not driven by our budget process, so it looks like, it looks to the community from the outside that it's been drifting, and this is just to give it some direction and target to work towards. The proponent would like to see some clarity on this sooner rather than later. He made his offer some 2 years ago, and since that time, charging vehicle infrastructure has increased in price from $30,000 a charger to over $40,000 a charger. Same with the power supply costs, so they're rising daily, as are all other construction costs. If we don't act quickly, we'll get to the stage where this proponent will walk away because it's no longer financially viable for him to make this investment. So that's why the motion is there, to commit in principle to work with this proponent, commit in principle to providing those 2 parking spots, and to set a target, something for us to work to. We're not in charge, we're not fully in control of that target, but we have a substantial role. We're on the critical path, the critical time path, to try and get those charges in place by this coming Christmas. Thank you.
Councillor Hart is the seconder.
Yeah, I'll reserve, Mayor.
Councillor Potter, you opposed?
Thanks, Mayor. And I don't oppose this on the basis of achieving an outcome as the business person is trying to achieve. I totally support it, and was working with him myself some years ago in relation to achieving electric vehicle charges in Apollo Bay, and I'd like to see some in Colac as well. Whilst there's Teslas down at Apollo Bay, we need another type to cater for other vehicles, and I'm pleased that the state government has contributed money to a program which helps people to achieve this and put these charges in place. What am objecting to is this process of doing this. I think we've heard loud and clear from officers that they are working on this. We're coming, from what I hear, very quickly to the end of this process that we'll be signing off on what we're required to do. That sounds like it's not very far at all. And what this says to me and in the public arena is, well, we haven't got any confidence in staff, so I'm going to make them do it. And, you know, Mr. Seren can attest to me nagging him for 2 years to try and get some things over the line. I don't bring those into the chamber and ask our other councillors to place him under an obligation to get these things done within a certain period of time. So I think this is a very, very dangerous practice. I applaud businessman from Apollo Bay with what he's trying to do. I am disappointed that it hasn't happened quicker, but I'm disappointed with a lot of things that haven't happened quicker. The point is they need to happen, and they are, and this is nearly at the end from the Shire point of view. We heard a strong undertaking from a staff member who's now got courage of it, that this is well underway, and I just don't like this practice. It's not about the subject matter, it's about the practice of doing this. I think it's unhealthy and sends a wrong message.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Mayor. I mean, I can understand why this has come about, and I understand why Councillor Costin would probably be frustrated. I mean, I could pick a number of different things that I've wanted to get done and they haven't been done in as quickly as what I'd like. I'm just not sure a notice of motion is the way to do it, when we should sort of be working with officers in a way that doesn't need to clog up council meetings. So I support Councillor Potter's points there. I guess I can see a sense of urgency in a way about this, but at the same time, like, as we've already heard, this actually doesn't do anything much or nothing substantive. So, I mean, it probably does no harm either. So I just think there are other ways to do things, and I'm not sure this is the right way.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. Interesting listening to some of the views put forward for this subject. I think it is a bit of a tricky one, and I think it probably does push the boundaries a little bit on how we work with the council staff with projects that are already existing and moving along, albeit, you know, perhaps not fast enough for some of us. But as Councillor McCracken and Councillor Potter pointed out, there are quite a few projects that fall under the same category, and we don't bring a notice of motion to try and quicken the processes of those projects up. So I too am cautious about, you know, using a notice of motion in this situation as a means to bring projects forward in their project planning. But having said that, given this notice of motion is in front of us right now, given the relative urgency around having this infrastructure in place so EVs can be better promoted, more widely used in our region, I think is a good thing. I don't encourage this sort of procedure, as I've just mentioned, to quicken projects up, as there are lots of important projects, but I'm happy to support this notice of motion in this case.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor White.
I found this a really difficult one because I think Councillor Potter said it as well. We strongly support the installation of EV chargers, and that's what we want to see across our region. It's probably a project that should be done with our regional partners as well. And I want to also congratulate the business owner in Apollo Bay for taking an initiative and moving along with it and setting an example and wanting to achieve the outcome. But again, I feel very strongly about process as well, and I'm not sure that this is the way to achieve that outcome that we're looking for. I think we need to work constructively with our council officers, and having heard tonight in discussion and question and answers, I feel confident that this is going to be achieved and it is well and truly on the way to completion by the end of the year. So I just don't... I understand that there is frustration, it hasn't moved along as quickly, but for me it's about process, and I'm not sure that using notices of motion for this purpose is really a positive one, and so I probably won't support it.
Councillor Hart, you reserved.
Thanks, Mayor. This resolution is consistent with the council plan. Here we have a generous offer from a local person to install an electric vehicle charger. I understand they've secured a grant to help with the cost of that. Electric vehicle use is increasing, and there needs to be more installations like this, particularly along the Great Ocean Road. If this resolution is adopted, then it would send a message to council to make an even greater effort to secure the installation of the chargers without further delay. On the issue of process, we've heard Councillor Potter say how he's been speaking about this for several years. Well, I think that's exactly the point why it's come to this. Ultimately, individual councillors have no power, no authority to direct staff to do anything. This is absolutely the right process. If this is genuinely a priority of this council, then it's absolutely correct that if it's not proceeding, and we've heard that it's been going on for some years, we've heard the importance of electric vehicles, that whether we like it or not, whether you support them or not, there's going to be more electric vehicles. That means people will be looking for this sort of equipment to areas they travel. The absolutely right process to send a message to council management is via a council resolution. I'm quite stunned at the suggestion that it's all right to have a quick word to an officer, but it's not right to bring a resolution to council and to send a direction that way. I wonder if some of us need to repeat our induction processes. This is the only way. The only way. It is already recorded in the council plan, and if that's not happening promptly, the only way we can legitimately send that message to management is via a council resolution. And if it's not put on the agenda by council officers, then the only way that councillors can bring it to a decision is to lodge a notice of motion as Councillor Costin has done. And we shouldn't see that as a negative. We should see that as a responsibility. And I think councillors need to have a refresher that having a quick word to the officer on the side, well, if it goes that way, that's fine, but that is not the process. This is the process, and of all the things to hear today that this is not the process, I was actually quite surprised to hear that from so many councillors.
Councillor Costin, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also surprised at this, particularly I don't understand Councillor Potter in saying that he's been pushing for this for years and years and nothing's happened. And here is something trying to make it happen and he trying to oppose it. I don't understand that. This is the process to follow if things aren't happening. What it provides is Basic Management 101. It provides a clear direction. It provides a time target and it provides in principle support. And if you're on the other side, if you're standing there with 100,000 in your pocket and you're wanting to do something and you're just being deferred around for 2 years, you want something to happen. And this proponent is talking to me every couple of days saying, what's going on? I sent an email in and I'm not getting a response. And we need to make sure that it is treated as a priority. It's not within our budget process, it's not driven by our dollars, but we need to make sure that we are working to a target here. And if we vote against this, gee, I don't know whether this offer is going to stay around because this proponent wants certainty. He's a private sector proponent. He wants certainty that he will partner with council. He wants certainty that council is going to work collaboratively with him to get something done sooner rather than later because his costs are going up every day. So I don't see a problem bringing this to council in this regard. And I'm surprised that some councillors are putting at risk the whole offer. Thank you.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's defeated 4-3. Division is called. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Bell. All those against? Councillor White, Councillor Potter, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Hanson. Now we move to item 10.21, notice of motion 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac sale proceeds report. The purpose of the report is to consider Councillor Hart's notice of motion regarding the sale proceeds of the 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac. Do councillors have any questions of officers or Councillor Hart? Councillor Hart.
Mayor, can I just point out that after advice from the agreed to by the CEO, the resolution has slightly changed, but may I ask that that be put up, please? So that's the words in red in point 3. And when you're ready, I'm happy to answer the questions, but I've also got a question of council management.
Are there any other questions? Well, Councillor Hart, you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Do council management think that the report on the use of the sale proceeds should be restricted to only considering projects in Colac and surrounds? If so, why does management think that only Colac and surrounds should be considered for the use of the proceeds?
Through the Mayor, I'm sorry, Councillor Hart. I'm sure that you've considered the wording in that question really carefully and I not quite sure I've got it all. Can you repeat it, please?
Happy to read it again.
Thank you.
Do council management think that the report on the use of the sale proceeds, that's from Bruce Street, should be restricted to only considering projects in Colac and surrounds? If so, why do management think that only Colac and surrounds should be considered for the use of the sale proceeds from Bruce Street?
Okay, thank you for repeating the question. So I just want to, start by saying that officers at this stage have been really focused on exchanging contracts of sale and getting underway with Bruce Street, the sale of. And whilst we're very aware of all of the elements of the decision that Council made as part of the decision to sell the land, we actually haven't sat down and actually put our mind to what the future report will look like. Therefore, I will just refer back at this time to the wording in the resolution, which you've included in your motion above, in your point 2, and you have contained that word for word. And so I would say at this time, I would be expecting that we will prepare a report that will present projects that are limited to Colac and surrounds. That is what the report would identify and present, but does not constrain council clearly in its decision. I hope that answers.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, CEO. Does council management have any objection to the term Colac and surrounds being removed, thus allowing a wider consideration?
Yeah, thank you. Through the Mayor. Councillor Hart, I actually don't think that's a matter for council officers to object or otherwise to. We will be guided by the decisions of council if they shape our report.
Councillor McCracken.
My question's to Councillor Hart. Is that all right? Could I speak freely and openly to Councillor Hart?
Ask a question.
I said, can I speak freely and openly to Councillor Hart and politely as well? Stephen, now, I'm guessing that the main thrust behind this is to reverse an amendment that was previously done. Is that...
I'll just make a note that the sale of Bruce Street was considered in closed session.
Yep.
So...
But all this stuff that we're talking about has...
The only part that has been publicly released through approval of council is the final decision, which has that council and 10 points.
I don't know.
But I said publicly released by council through an approved process, and I would encourage councillors to constrain their discussion to the resolution which has now been put on our website. But the discussion, debate and content of the report and the meeting procedures themselves are confidential.
Okay.
Trying to ask though.
I understand what you're trying to ask, and I think, Mayor, perhaps some of this might be for debate if there's a seconder. As I've said in my supporting statement, councillors voted on the two matters as one: selling the property and how the proceeds might be used. I mean, I'm probably going into debate, and I'm happy if you prefer me to go into debate. But obviously, from the fact I've put this on, I disagree with the restriction to Colac and surrounds. So the purpose of this resolution is to request of management a report that's already been requested that has more wider consideration. And yes, I think even the wording in the resolution says it supersedes that part of the early decision, but only that part, the words Colac and surrounds. And I don't intend to get into any discussion about where those words came from, because that was confidential.
You know, that's fair enough. I guess the question I'm just trying to get clear in my head is you are seeking to alter what was already passed in the sense that, yeah.
Seeking to alter a resolution, yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep,
I think we
that's all
might
right.
leave it for debate. All right. So, Councillor Hart, this is your motion. You're the mover. Councillor Potter, have you got a question or you're seconding it? Oh, you've got a question.
So funny, Councillor Hart. Yes, a question of officers, please, Mayor, if I can. Just in relation to the sale of the Apollo Bay Kindergarten, what is the ballpark figure that council will receive for that sale, if you can remember?
Through you, Mayor. I need to be careful about answering that question, Councillor Potter, because we haven't released the valuation amount for that site. I wouldn't want to impact any future sale.
Yeah, fair enough. I apologise for that. There was a resolution in relation to the sale of the kindergarten and what would happen to the proceeds of the sale of that kindergarten. And as I recall it, the resolution was to spend some of that money as already committed in relation to kindergarten, and the balance of that money was to be used for a project in Apollo Bay. Not Apollo Bay and surrounds or anywhere else, but Apollo Bay. Am I on the right track with that?
Through you, Mayor, yes, that's my recollection of the resolution of council.
All right. Councillor Hart, you're the mover. Is there a seconder for this motion? If there's no seconder, it'll lapse. Councillor Costin is the seconder. Is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken, you opposed. Councillor Hart is the mover.
Jeez, I'm getting treated rough today, Mayor. The sale of the land at Bruce Street, Colac, to create more residential blocks is a great outcome for the community and it's a great outcome for the council. The substantive resolution adopted on 4th of May 2022 has been released to the public, although other parts remain confidential. And the CEO can relax. I'm crystal clear on that issue. Due to a decision last month by 5 of 7 councillors, that's all that's been released. When a land sale was considered in open council... Sorry? No. In relation to the release of the minutes, the vote was 5 out of 7. There was a vote against Councillor Costin's resolution to release all the details. So what we do know is when a land sale was considered in open council meeting in Apollo Bay on 20th of April, councillors were able to vote separately on selling the land and how the sale proceeds might be used. And those resolutions are on page 572 of the agenda to have a look at. 7 councillors voted to sell the land in Apollo Bay, and some councillors voted against the resolution for the use of the proceeds in Apollo Bay, even though they voted in favour of selling it. Entirely proper, no question of that process. Contrast that to the sale of the Bruce Street land. The resolution for the sale of Bruce Street land in comparison was unusual. If councillors voted against the sale, wanted to vote against the report of the sales proceeds to be restricted to Colac and surrounds, they also had to vote against selling the land. Conversely, if you wanted to vote to sell the land, then you had to support the report being limited to Colac and surrounds. That was unusual, and due to the enforced secrecy, I'm not allowed to say how that circumstance arose. Had the substantive resolutions been separated, and note that they weren't, so there's the sale of the property, there's how you use the process, and that didn't happen, so I can comment on what I would have done because it didn't happen and doesn't reflect what happened in the meeting. Had that been done, I would have voted in favour of selling the land, but against the use of the words Colac and surrounds. This resolution allows us to deal with these issues separately. Regardless of different views around the table, finally we'll be able to deal with these issues separately. I do think there is a lack of clarity about what and surrounds means. Obviously Colac, a limonite can be included. What about Barongarook? Probably. Biak, Birregurra, Beach Forest, just to name a few. It appears that all towns along the Great Ocean Road are excluded, including the coast. But if that is the intent, why wouldn't the resolution just say those areas that are to be excluded? The fact that some councillors have a different understanding of whether Birregurra can be considered or not, or Forest can be considered or not, or Biak or Cressy, the fact there are different views on that just highlights the lack of clarity around the term Colac and surrounds. All ratepayers have contributed to the costs associated with the Bruce Street land. It was different from the community contribution to the Apollo Bay kindergarten site. Council should be open to consider all areas of the Shire, and I think that those who argue that the expenditure should be limited to Colac and surrounds should explain where the border is. Where exactly is the border? Is it a 1 kilometre radius? Is it a 5 kilometre radius, 10 kilometre radius of Colac? Exactly how far from Colac, if you're going to keep these words, is the area defined as Colac and surrounds, and why the coastal towns excluded and why the other towns excluded?
Councillor Costin is the seconder. Councillor McCracken, you opposed.
Thanks, Mayor. I feel like we're just rehashing arguments from a time ago, and I accept that when a decision is made that someone may not necessarily like the outcome, and that's fine, but what this is doing is basically re-prosecuting a similar argument just from a different angle. So I guess in terms of process, I mean, for me, a decision was made, and I'm happy to support what the decision was. To bring it back again, it's just gives an opportunity to rehash old arguments, and that's fine if you want to have that argument. That's good, but I'm not going to support this because I'm quite comfortable with what is currently in place.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I thank Councillor Hart for his explanation, although I knew it for how this came about, and I appreciate that. And look, in the past, I've had to vote for things where there was an item or two that I didn't agree with, but to achieve the greater good, you park that and you vote in favour of something. I just want to make a couple of points. First one is, and I voted for this, and that was the sale of a property in Apollo Bay, and for the proceeds of that sale to be confined for projects in Apollo Bay. Not Wangara, not Labour's Hill, not Tenebrine.
Sorry, point of order. That wasn't the resolution. The resolution that was passed reads resolves to reserve the remaining net sale proceeds for part funding of the childcare component of the Apollo Bay Early Years Hub per Council's 16 December 2020 resolution. The funds went to a specific project, a priority project.
Yeah, okay. You've just heard it, okay, specifically where they went.
Yes, okay. A project in Apollo Bay. Not anywhere else. And I think the definition of Colac and surrounds, I think, is pretty broad. And you can look at that through a narrow lens, or you can look at that through a wider lens, as I do. And I'm comfortable with that call. I see a lot of opportunity for Colac Otway Shire, not just Colac, if the proceeds of the Bruce seat sale is used wisely and without trying to preempt anything. You know, the potential is to make a contribution to our budget bottom line that benefits the whole community and so forth. But my definition and version of surrounds is much broader than perhaps Councillor Hart's is. Happy to try and quantify it down the track if that's what he wants, but I don't rule out anything, but I do stand by the wording of that particular resolution.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin, you reserved.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I support the sale of Bruce Street. It's a great step towards affordable and social housing. But I do believe Council has a responsibility to allocate its limited resources to the best possible outcomes for all its communities, the best possible outcomes, not to favourite areas. And that's what's been done here. I felt it set a disturbing precedent where we could use closed meetings to avoid our good governance and avoid our commitment to good governance and transparency. The words Colac and surrounds have no basis in a council policy, no basis in strategy. Colac and surrounds is not on the priority project list or any forward budget. We're not being transparent about it. We haven't explained to the community why we've made that decision. That's part of our community engagement policy, explaining our decisions. It's just poor governance. really poor. You can't compare this to any way, shape or form to the decision that was made to allocate funds to the Apollo Bay childcare project. The Apollo Bay preschool that we sold was a gifted asset. It had been maintained by the community for over 50 years. And the project we allocated the funds to, the project, not the area, not a favourite area, but the project, it was a priority project, which we declared by resolution as a priority project and asked Council to ask our officers to find funds to move that project along by 2023. So that was what's that about. There's no comparison whatsoever to these words that say Colac and surrounds. Now, the words I hear about this in the community down the coast, the community that's disadvantaged without any consultation, being disadvantaged by the words Colac and surrounds, are like disgraceful, favouritism, puerile, divisive, vindictive even, because of a previous decision. They're not my words.
Point of order with that language, Mayor.
Yeah,
please.
just keep the debate respectful.
They're not my words, they're the words of the community.
Well, perhaps you should have phrased it like that.
So, look, I'm inclined to be a little more generous than the way the community looks at it, and I think that a couple of councillors might have sort of got caught up in the moment and voted for something not for reasons of good governance and not for reasons that would deliver the best possible outcomes for all our communities. And what Councillor Hart has done is offered you an opportunity to show that you're prepared to make decisions in the best interests of all our communities, not just
Time, Councillor.
Not just favourite areas. Thank you.
Councillor Hart, you have a right of reply.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just on this issue of re-prosecuting a decision that's been made, the report hasn't been presented yet. The circumstances to present this report haven't occurred yet. It might be any number of months before this report is due to be presented. So it's entirely reasonable to remove those words so that we can broaden out what that report addresses. The other point I make, though, is that if you look at other parts of this resolution, Council's not bound to restrict it in this way. All that this means is the reported suggestions that come back from management's bound to identify projects in Colac and surrounds, but Council's not bound by that either. So it's a bit clumsy that all options aren't on the table. And really, I think that management can't honestly say what's in and what's out. That some people have the view that Birregurra's in, some that don't. If you look at the Colac and surrounds, to me that sounds within close proximity of Colac. It's a clumsy set of words. It's a clumsy instruction. And the report's not due for months, so it's easy to change that now and to treat the entire municipality fairly rather than being restricted by a clumsy set of words, which of course I note, Mayor, I can't say how those words came about. So this is an opportunity to treat the entire municipality fairly and to remove the lack of clarity about what "and surrounds" means.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is lost. 3-4. Division, all those in favour? Councillor Hart, Councillor White, Councillor Costin, all those against? Councillor Potter, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell, Councillor Hanson. Now we move to item 1022, notice of motion.
Take a break.
Yes, we can take a 10-minute break if you'd like.
Thank you.
All right, councillors, we might get going again. We will get going again. Now we move to item 10.22, Notice of Motion, Carbon Emissions and Offsets. The purpose of the report is to consider Councillor Costin's notice of motion regarding carbon emissions and offsets. I think the CEO would like to just give a brief overview before we deal with this motion.
Thank you, Mayor. So before we get into questions and the motion itself, officers do have some information that relates to the type of offsets that are available to council by category, and the Acting General Manager of Environment and Infrastructure has some information there. So I'll ask Brian to just step through those opportunities, the types of offsets that are available, the indicative cost in the context of our budget, just so that councillors, as you move towards this notice of motion, you've got that information.
So, councillors, if you remember, there was a verification report that indicated we had category 1 and 2 offsets, about 1,519 tonne. So options in relation to buying those offsets, which we haven't done at the moment, but we need a decision sooner rather than later. Green fleet was $18 a tonne, which equated to just over $27,000, the budget being $26,000. They're not certified offsets. There are green fleet staples with certification for international offsets that were quoted by Pangolin. They're $27.20 per tonne, which equates to $41,344, which is about 50% above the current budget. Or you can get Australian certified offsets at $35 a tonne, which equates to just over $53,000, which is double the current budget we have. So staff worked towards the current budget we have, $26,000, and Green Fleet was the one that worked within those budgets. Happy to take any further questions on that. Also, in relation to joining Climate Active, there's a licensing fee of $7,500 and also a biannual auditing fee of $5,000, so an extra $10,000 per year going forward. So there's some extra costs if you wanted to go down the track of having accredited and certified offsets.
Can I just ask, is that 7.5 and the 5,000 on top of the 41 or the 53?
That's correct, Mayor, yes it is.
Otherwise we can just buy the right. So which offsets are you talking about in your notice of motion?
Wants the ability to purchase certified offsets but not go that extra step to be ticked off as certified. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's what that's what we agreed before.
So which ones are they? The 27,000, the 41 or the 53? What's the dollar value?
I'm just saying, I'm trying to interpret what was being said. I don't know what one's there.
So I guess a question to officers, or that point 4, are we talking about the 27, the 41 or the $53,000? That's for point 4.
The middle one is stapled certified offsets, that's 41,000. Certified international offsets, which varies between $22,800 and $38,000. So some concern with the international ones as to in relation to the certification. Certainly the Australian certified offsets are $35 a tonne. Which are the cheapest? Well, Green Fleet's the cheapest. Certified international offsets vary between $15 and $25 a tonne. They're international certified offsets, sorry. Varies between $22,800 and $38,000 depending on which ones you need to offset it, but we need to do some investigation into that as to the certification validity of those.
Councillor Costin.
So, Brian, we could buy certified international offsets cheaper than Greenfleet offsets?
I don't have specific details of that, but the table that we've got is between $15 and $25 when this table was put together. Yeah, Greenfleet's $18, not certified.
Sorry, through the Mayor. So Greenfleet sits in that range of the international offsets. They're not all cheaper than Greenfleet. We've provided a range because, as Brian says, there's a bit of work before we would be comfortable to purchase the ones that are international and certified, because there's a few questions around which ones in that range we really would want to see.
So Stephen, then Councillor Bell, have you put your hand up?
Thanks,
No.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'm just going to repeat this because I just want to be absolutely clear on it. What I'm hearing is that there's some certified international offsets that are actually cheaper than Greenfleet, which is uncertified. Is that a correct understanding? And if that is, wouldn't it be a matter of just teasing out which ones they are?
Yeah, through the Mayor, that's correct. The $15 ones, but no, I'm not exactly sure what they are or how valid they are.
And may I just, sorry for butting in, but I wonder if this resolution might be better worded that be teased out rather than either just throwing it away or committing to it.
Councillor Bell had a question first.
Well, my interpretation of things, and Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong, but there are some international offsets. We know that there's a range of what the price is, but we don't know if all of them are certified or not. So is it the $15 ones? We don't know. Or is it the more expensive ones? I'm guessing that's probably, I don't know.
International certified offsets are in that range.
Yeah, but which ones?
I don't.
Well,
Yeah, that's correct. There's a range between 15 and 25, but I don't have any more information on the $15 ones.
And that certification, Brian, it's the same certification that, Graham, you're talking about, like it's the same standard of certification? Yeah. Yeah. Exactly, so they're not certified. So may that be no different to Greenfleet? By the Australian, that standard, that was my question. The standard... Yeah, which, if that is the case, I'd like to see that. It's definitely, as Councillor Hart said, I think we should explore that. But I don't know if I'm ready to commit to it tonight. Exactly. Even though it's offshore, which is a pity, but if that's what we're looking for, to overachieve it. But I want to be convinced that...
We just don't want to get into debate.
Yeah.
I think, have you got questions?
So what's been holding us back with the offsets is...
I think we probably better make a decision whether we're going to just defer it or... And councillors can bring a summary.
Page summary of offsets.
Yeah.
What they are, where you get them, why the costs vary, rather than a whole council report.
Yeah. Councillor Hart.
All right with that?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I'm mindful that this is Councillor Costa's resolution and he has to have the first opportunity to move it or something. But a way forward might be to defer consideration of this resolution, and the CEO, I'm sure, could help with the words, with a view to getting clarity around what we're just discussing.
That would be better. Okay. Councillor Costin, it's your motion. Do you want to move it, or do you want to move something else?
I'd like the report and the England Associates report to come to the council and will be released to the public. It's a report that we get to ourselves at the moment.
Okay, so are you moving? Oh, okay, so you're moving it. Are you changing the resolution?
Is there another way to do that, Annie? Can you do that through an officer recommendation to council?
We're happy to do it next month when you consider the motion.
Do it next month as well, correct?
Include it.
Yeah, could be a pretty good, outcome.
Include it.
I'd probably prefer that to next month with the price and all in my way.
So what are you doing? What are you doing here, Councillor Costin? Are you deferring this? We just need we can have a.
And you're happy to bring an officer report?
No, I'd prefer not to, Councillor Costin, because then officers will actually make a recommendation, and that's not really where your motion is trying to take us. I actually think if you want to move your motion, you should have the opportunity to do that, albeit you could perhaps move a motion to defer this matter, and request that a short summary of the offset marketplace, domestic and international, and indicative costs be circulated prior to the next meeting.
Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right.
So, yep. So can I suggest some wording so we can move on? Yep. That the council defer this matter until consideration at the July council meeting. After officers have provided a summary paper of the carbon offset opportunities.
Councillor Bell.
Hey, thanks, Mayor. Could I just...
hasn't been moved yet.
Can I just ask a question? With the report, the summary paper that comes back to us... Sorry? Summary paper. Is it possible that we could, and we'll all do our own research, I'm sure, but is it possible we could have a bit of context around the market volatility or around what the change has occurred recently? And I'm just thinking about time in which we're going to make the decision. Are the prices running away from us or are they not? I mean, I think it's a consideration. I'm not sure how difficult that is to achieve. I doubt it's very hard. Just throwing it out there.
We can pay Panklin to prepare one.
Okay, can we add the words in after consideration and receives the Panklin report? So the report gets tabled. So we're providing context.
Pardon? We don't have to prepare anything for the agenda, Councillor Hart, because this motion will come back. It'll have an attachment if the Pangolin report is requested through this motion. And in the background, we'll provide a 1 or 2 page summary about carbon offset marketplace, what's the difference between domestic and international? Why is there a range in international? And it's because there are a whole range of ways that offsets are achieved internationally. It can be revegetation, it can be burning at a different time of year, it can be renewable energy investment, and that's why it is so variable. It depends on the country and the project, and that's why.
Speak into the microphone.
I mean, I can understand why you'd want it at July, but you could consider saying at a future council meeting, because you don't know what the outcome of a briefing session is going to be. And you may need more time, you might need less, and then it doesn't prohibit it from bringing it back at July, but I'm just saying you might need more time and you could put more in it. You can bring it to July if you want to. All right, that's just an option.
Officers already have a budget and a direction from council, and so we would actually like to be able to implement that. It feels like the direction's being reviewed, which is fine, but we also would look for some direction. Let's wrap it up.
All right, so Councillor Costin, you're the mover. Is there a seconder? Okay. Councillor Hart is the seconder to defer it. Councillor Costin is the mover. No. Councillor Hart? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Okay, we'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.23, report of informal meetings of councillors. Please note that the purpose of this item is to report the informal meetings of councillors and does not require a council decision. Okay, now we move to item 10.20. Notice of motion, confirmation of closed session, minutes of the 4th of May 2022, unscheduled council meeting. We're going to have to move into closed session. Oh, okay.
Mayor, I'm happy that we move into closed session, but we need some substance around that.
Yes.
Can we get some assurance that that's the only thing we're going to discuss in closed session?
Yes.
Well, there could be no other business that you can consider in closed session unless it's urgent business and it meets the criteria.
We discussed that and nothing else.
Correct.
Okay, so Councillor Hart, you're going to move the motion that's up on the screen.
Well, sorry, Mayor, doesn't have to quote section something or other?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
You're going to make that up later? Yeah.
Yes, that councillors we have...
Oh, okay. So, I apologise, I didn't see that page.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sort of.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter, is there to be opposed? Councillor Hart, we're just moving procedural motion. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Righto. Items carried 7-0. Okay, this concludes the open part of this month's council meeting. Thank you for joining us via the live stream. The meeting will now be closed to the public. For this reason, the live stream will now cease. Thank you. Oh, we've got to actually, sorry. We just moved it, didn't we? Okay, oh yes, we have a recommendation up there that pursuant to section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to the public and council move into closed session in order to deal with the confirmation of the closed session minutes of the 4th of May 2022 unscheduled council meeting.